And here, YouTube #1 live streamer. It's time for another episode of Rose Reads. My nickname is Ro, and we're talking about different books that I've read. I've taken notes on them, and I share with you some of the notes that I take. So I'm hoping to edify you, inspire you, educate you, get you to think about things in a different way, motivate you, and all that. So we've been doing Applied Economics by Thomas Sowell. He's an esteemed black economist. Last time I did this, I was in Florida. And I can't believe that it's been this long since I've done a Rose Reads. What's up, Adam? How are you? Hi, Bodie. Great to see both of you. And we're getting started with my notes. This is page 2 of my notes from the book Applied Economics by Thomas Sowell. What's up, good cat? Yeah, I've uh, somebody in the chat can tell you why I haven't been okay. I don't want to start crying again, but maybe good cat, you can tell him why I was offline for about 6 weeks. All right, so so here, and these are just notes and quotes that I'm taking from the book Applied Economics by Thomas Sowell. So the last part we were talking about was slavery. And what he said is much of the white population of 17th century colonial America, so 17th century is 1600s, more than half arrived as indentured servants. Well, many were auctioned off after reaching land because they were indentured to the ship owners. So a lot of people don't realize that slavery was not just black individuals; it was also many white individuals. And people may quibble that there's a difference between slavery and indentured servitude, but when push comes to shove, they are somebody's property, and you don't get to do and live as you like until the owner says that you can. And he says in the 25 years starting in 1849, 90,000 Chinese were shipped from China to Peru. Another 125,000 Chinese were shipped to Cuba. Many of these Chinese had been tricked, drugged, or forced into these indentures, as had been true of the 17th century Britons, including children who were brought to the Western Hemisphere involuntarily. Why does Thomas Sowell talk about this? He's a black man and he's an economist, but he's trying to let people know that blacks were not the only people to be enslaved, and many slaves were white and Asian. And if you think back to the Roman Empire, everybody was enslaved by the Roman Empire. Blacks, whites, Jews. I mean, it was an equal opportunity enslavement. And so what Thomas Sowell in this book, Applied Economics, is talking about is just reminding everybody that don't rag on the United States for slavery. Yes, because it was terrible, but it's not like the United States invented it. The United States did not invent slavery. Slavery was around for many, many millennia before it happened in the United States. And to be honest, slavery continues today around the world. Anyway, that's his point. That's why he shares it. Let me get some comments there because that's an interesting topic. See what you've got. Hi, Adam. Adam says I look like an attorney. Yeah, today was a work day. Hi, Galaxy. You got your surgery. Moment, am I 30 or 60? I am both. I am both 30 and 60 people on TikTok and YouTube. Adam says Thomas Sowell is one of the best economists we have in the U.S. for several decades now. Yeah, Adam, terrible news. I don't want to start crying, so I don't want to talk about it right at this moment. Maybe it'll come up in a little bit, but today we're talking about applied economics. Yeah, Bodhi, the word slave comes from the word Slavic, which means the Slavic people. And the Slavic people are not from Africa. So, I mean, isn't that interesting? The word for slave in English comes from the word Slav. So I'm glad you pointed that out. And Dancer's over here and wants a belly rub. So I got to give her a rub with my foot. Moving on. For centuries, said Thomas Sowell, Europeans enslaved other Europeans, Asians enslaved other Asians, and Africans enslaved other Africans. And it's just an important thing to do. Slavery has been around forever. And the modern world is so much better than how it was 300 years ago, 600 years ago, 2,000 years ago. The modern world today is quite accepting of people. I know that there's a lot of crazy stuff going on in the world. And humans are humans, and we have a lot to improve. All of us are sinful. All of us are prideful. Everyone's in the pursuit of power, and that's why we got all of these wars going on and arguments and blah, 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 blah. What somebody's asking me a question on TikTok and going, will you please answer my question? Okay, TikTok person, will you answer my question? What's your question? What do I think about BlackRock? It's an investment firm. They were involved in ESG policies for a long time. I believe it's ESG. And I think they moved away from it. But they're a big investing firm. That's really all I know. And okay. So I hope you liked my answer. Kirk says F TikTok. Maybe so. We are so. What's up, Raccoon Merchant? Says we are Charlie Kirk. We carry the flame. I don't know why so many people think so poorly about Charlie Kirk. He really didn't say anything that was that horrible. He tried to engage people, just as I'm trying to engage people. I'm trying to do so respectfully, and with respect for what everybody thinks, and I hope people respect what I say. And everyone's got a perspective, and I think Charlie Kirk really just wanted people to try to do a better job of understanding one another, and try to justify and buttress their arguments with good logic and facts. And that's it. Galaxy, I hope you feel better. I know you just had your surgery on your wrist. Let me see. Tony says, what do I do for work? I am a lawyer. I also run a not-for-profit social media company called Break Diving. You can download our mobile app on on the Apple App Store, the Google Play Store. You can also go to breakdiving.io, BREAKDIVING.io. So let's continue with our discussion of applied economics by Thomas Sowell. Thomas Sowell shared in his book, he says, Brazil and the United States had the two largest slave populations in the Western Hemisphere. Isn't that interesting? So Brazil and the United States had the two biggest slave population in the Western Hemispheres. Most of you probably didn't even know about Brazil because most people focus on the United States. Why? Just because the United States is a more economically robust country, just because the United States is a militarily robust country? Why is there criticism of the United States, but there is not similar criticism of Brazil? And that's the point that Thomas Sowell makes in his book, Applied Economics. It's a really great book, and you should all read it. He goes on to talk about that some Southern whites did not believe in slaves, such as the Quakers, but they had to own them as a legal formality in order for them to work on the farm. But the Quakers always said they were free to leave at any time. So in that sense, it was just a employment relationship. Moving on. A different, again, he talks about so many different topics in the book. He moves on to saying only 13% of Americans' medical card costs are paid directly out of pocket. What does that mean? That means that 87% of Americans' medical costs are paid by insurance companies of some way, shape, or form. Let me look and see some comments. User says, how much money do I make per year as a lawyer? I make my salary minus New York City tax, minus New York state tax, minus federal income tax. And whatever's left over, I get to take home. Galaxy says she's the most bored person in the world. You say that you're the most bored person in the world while you're a moderator on my live stream. I thought I was entertaining. You're supposed to encourage people to feel like this live stream is exciting and entertaining. Bodhi says Brazil has nearly the population now that we do. Not sure what it was like. Yeah. I mean, that's the whole thing. Everybody selectively chooses things that they want to criticize. And I'm just talking about politics, but about everything. It's like people criticize the United States, but they very rarely leave. They very rarely say, oh, there's another country that does it better. Or if they do point out a country that does it better, they don't usually go there. I'm very curious to see. I know there are a lot of celebrities who have left the United States in the last few years for political reasons. I'm curious to see if they come back. But here's the thing. I love living abroad. I love living in Europe, and I loved being in Iraq. I loved living in China. I would have no problem living outside the United States for 10 years. It's not because I don't like the United States, it's because I enjoy living abroad. So if, as I say, causation does not mean correlation. So if these celebrities don't come back, maybe they just like living abroad. I don't know. We'll have to see. You had a ganglion cyst in your wrist, 3 inches long. Wow, Galaxy, that's a big one. That's right. Good cat. I mean, the only reason I got a job is because I pay my moderators. I don't like to talk about it, but I pay them $3,000 per month. So Mr. Good Cat gets $3,000 per month. Galaxy gets $3,000 a month. I mean, that's $6,000 right there per month. It is stressful. I mean, to pay these moderators that much, and I only do live stream maybe once a month. Extremely high paid positions, but they're really good at their job. And Galaxy is amazing. Good Cat's amazing, and so it's worth it. He talks about Mr. Thomas Sowell in the book Applied Economics. Welcome to Rose Reads. My name is Monroe Mann. Please subscribe. Please click like. We only have 4 likes. I think we should get some more. By the way, when we get to 10 likes, we get the bronze medal on the YouTube live stream Olympics. So he talks about price controls. And it is true. When you have price controls, quality declines and service declines. Where's the proof? Ask anyone who lives in a rent-controlled building. Most of them will tell you that the building is not run exceedingly well, and that there are things that need to be improved in the building that are not improved. Why? Because the landlord doesn't have the incentive to fix it because the rent is controlled. So they're not making as much money as they would in the open market. And as a result, they can't use some of that extra gross income to pay for improvements. He talks about government paid medical care. He says, what is government medical care? It's price controls. And he says, this is often the case where hospital staff end up with great job protection And visits with doctors increased for the same ailment that would have been solved in one visit prior to the government paid medical care. And he says, in government run healthcare, waiting lists for elective surgery generally tend to exist. For those of you who don't know, elective surgery is something that's not really life or death, it's more cosmetic. Getting a tummy tuck is elective surgery. Getting a, I'm trying to think, facelift, anything that is not really going to extend your life is considered elective surgery. He says that wait times for surgery in places like Britain are significantly higher than in the United States, sometimes 15 months, and this is the same in Canada. And this is the thing, people talk all the time about, oh my gosh, Denmark has free healthcare, Canada has free healthcare. Taxes are much higher, and the wait times are longer. I'm not saying that the United States has the solution and that what we do in America for healthcare is perfect. I mean, I do think there are problems here too, but I don't think the be all and end all solution is to socialize everything and have government run healthcare. Now, that being said, I am a veteran and I go to the VA hospital, the Veterans Hospital, for my medical care, and it's very good. So I'm caught in the middle between two arguments because on one hand, I don't agree with government run healthcare, and yet I benefit from government run healthcare because I go to the VA. But at the same time, here's the wrinkle. I have the option at any time to go to a private hospital or a private doctor and pay out of pocket. And I think that's the problem, is in a lot of these places where there's government run healthcare, you don't get the ability to go to private doctors. This is why so many people do medical tourism. They have a wait list in their country, or their country says you have to use this doctor at this government run healthcare system. And so they come to the United States. More people come to the United States for medical care, for very serious medical care. Now, a lot of American people say, oh, but there's so many people that go to other countries, like Americans go to Mexico, or Mexicans go to Colombia, or Mexicans go to Dominican Republic for medical treatment. Why? Because it's less expensive. However, usually the quality is also questionable as well. Now, I'm not saying that every doctor in the United States is perfect. I'm not. I'm saying that there are a lot of wrinkles when we talk about these issues with government-run healthcare versus privately run healthcare. And it does come down to economics and price controls and the pros and cons of those. Let me look at these comments on what do we got? We have no comments on TikTok, on YouTube. What do we have? Brown Fox says Monroe hasn't been the same since the divorce. That is true. Ben says Monroe's ex-wife just joined the chat. Adam says, I would support a single payer option that's government run, but not a requirement. People can have the option of private health insurance or the government one. People can choose which they want. Now, Adam, see, that's why I think the Veterans Administration healthcare system in the United States works, because the veterans have the option to go to a private hospital. I do. Have there been times when I've gone to a private doctor because it was closer or because I wanted a second opinion? 100%. I think the problem is when the only choice you have is the government-run healthcare system. So, but here's the other thing too. People talk to me and they go, Monroe, you're benefiting from a government-run healthcare system. I'm not. I'm paying for it. I paid for it with my life. I put my life on the line in Iraq and in other places to protect the country, and in return, I've earned the healthcare. And that's the problem. Like no one gets veteran healthcare system unless they served their country honorably. But with these government-run healthcare systems, the rich And the employed end up paying for the healthcare for those who are lazy or don't work. The disabled is a different story, but the disabled are already being covered by Medicaid and other low income. Hey, Dancer, do you like Thomas Sowell too? Dancer wants to. You like talking economics? But that's really when we're talking about government run healthcare. It's not politics we're talking. It's not a political question. It is more an economic question and a financial question. And that's what you need to really think about. Hi, 2 people on TikTok. Amazing. 2 people on TikTok. Adam says many Americans do medical tourism because of price, me included. Matthew says my kidney was stolen in Mexico. I'm very sorry to hear that. But I want to say thank you to you, Matthew, because your kidney has kept me alive and avoided continued dialysis treatments. Adam's getting dental work done in Mexico and possibly a surgery. Mexico has amazing doctors in big cities. And that's the point. Mexico does have great doctors, and you could potentially get it for less money than you would pay in the United States. But that's not an argument for government run healthcare. That shows that having options is a good thing. Think about it. If you have lots of private doctors in the United States, that's competition. Having all these different private doctors in other countries like Mexico, people like Adam can shop around. I've often toyed with the idea of getting a hair transplant. It's not terrible, but my hairline used to be here, and now it's here. And there's a place in Dominican Republic for $2,500 US. They put me up in a hotel, car transportation to and from the airport in Santo Domingo, plus the hair transplant and all that. If I wanted to do a hair transplant in the United States, it's probably $6,000 to $10,000. Now, of course, do I have to make sure that the people in Santo Domingo know what the heck they're doing? Yeah. But you should be doing due diligence no matter who your doctor is. They always say get a second opinion. That applies not just to medical procedures, but it applies to lawyers you hire. It applies to the people who do your taxes. It applies to anyone you take investment advice from. I always talk about investments, saying invest in the S&P 500. It's a very conservative investment that's probably going to give you 10% annual returns in the long run, which is really good. But don't take my word for it. Get a second opinion. Always get a second opinion. Galaxy says, who you're talking about? Adam says, about this man. Matthew says, that's what they did. Bodie says, American taxpayers pay for most pharmaceutical development. And we subsidize other countries' low pharmaceuticals costs by the prices we pay for prescriptions. Yeah, that's absolutely the truth. The reason the pharmaceutical countries can charge so little for their drugs in other countries is because they charge so much for their drugs here in the United States. That's an important point, Bodie, that a lot of people do not know. Bye, Galaxy. See you later. Olivia Maynard says Japan has great healthcare, so does Cuba. This is a fascinating thing. My old doctor at the Miami VA, a wonderful doctor, American. Guess where she got her medical degree? In Cuba, in Havana. I think she's part Cuban or something like that, but she went to med school in Cuba, came to the United States, became a doctor, and now she's a doctor at the VA in Miami. And that's the same thing about even these socialist governments. I mean, we talk about in the news, we hear about Cuba, we hear about China, this and that. Certainly, they have a different government that is not good in many ways. But nothing is good or as bad as it first appears. I lived in Shanghai twice. I went back there again because it was such a great experience, and it's such a wonderful city and the wonderful people there. And I hate to admit it, but Shanghai is a very efficiently run clean, high-tech, modern, hip city. And a lot of people who have never been to China, they do not have any idea. They just assume, just they're watching the news, that it's just a terrible place and that all the people are oppressed. Now, granted, there are people oppressed in China, and that needs to be addressed. But there are problems here in the United States too. Now, I'm not justifying China and I'm not justifying the United States, but I'm trying to just remind you that there are pros and cons to absolutely everything. And I think this is what I think is the problem with politics today is no one's recognizing the good in the other side. And I think we all should recognize the yin and the yang. And if you've ever seen the yin and yang symbol, there's a black swirl with a white dot in it, and there's a white swirl with a black dot in it. And that's to remind you that in everything, there is something else. In all the good, there is bad. In all the bad, there isn't good. In all the left, there's a little right. In all the right, there is a little left. And if we would all try to embrace that, which we did politically 20 years ago, the left and the right had differences, but they recognized that there were similarities and there were places of common ground. What's up, people on TikTok? Today, there's no effort to find any common ground. And if you find common ground on the left or right, you're deemed a traitor. It's gotten to that point where if someone on the left agrees with anything that Trump says, you've betrayed the left. And if anyone on the right agrees with something that the left proposes in any way, shape, or form, they're ostracized too. And I think we need to get away from that and find out that there is more common ground. And it's such a trite thing to say. There's more that unites us than divides us. But it's true. And this applies to your personal life too. Don't hate everybody. There's probably more in common that you have with the enemies in your life than you realize. All right. Let's see. Adam says Cuba exports tons of doctors and is horrible to live in. I don't know if I use Cuba as an example. But again, Adam, that's what I'm saying is like, again, I don't support Cuba's government. And I talk to people from Cuba that are in the U.S. down in Miami Beach. They're not very happy. But even my doctor friend said, it's bad, but there are parts of it that are good. And again, I'm not an apologist for Cuba, but and they need to improve what goes on there. Absolutely. Politzi says, "Thank you, God bless President Trump," says Politzi, "and our brave ICE agents saving our beautiful country." Politzi says, "China gave us COVID. Never forget that." China, it seems all evidence does point to the fact that COVID originated in China. It is what it is. Again, I'm not going to be one of those people that just rags on China because I like China. My dad was in China during World War II, and he lived for 7 months in Shanghai in the Broadway Mansions Hotel on the Bund. My grandpa imported Chinese replica furniture from Hong Kong. Here's some of it that I inherited from my mom. That desk over there is Ming Dynasty replica. This table right here, this is Ming Dynasty replica furniture. So no country is perfect. Even the United States. And I've said this before, I prefer living outside of the United States. And then people say, well, then why don't you leave? Why don't you get out of here? Well, I like the United States too. Like, why can't I like both of them? I think the United States is an incredible country and that has done amazing things in this world. I also think the United States has a lot to learn from the rest of the world and can do things a lot better. If you think, well, what could they do better? I think They could do a better job with public transportation. Why does China, Japan, South Korea, Europe, even some parts of Africa have high-speed train, and the United States doesn't? Why don't we have a high-speed train going from New York to Los Angeles? It's like bonkers. Makes no sense. They go, well, it's because of the vehicle lobby, and the vehicle lobbyists. Well, fix this. Then clearly we have a problem with the vehicle lobbies. Because we should have a high-speed train. I'm happy to see that there is a high-speed train now, privately run, the Brightline train from Miami to West Palm Beach, and I think this year going to Tampa. And I was on it. It's beautiful. It's just as great as any of the trains in Asia and Europe. There's a Brightline train going from it's not La Cucaracha, but a city near Los Angeles to Las Vegas. Good. It's starting. But there are all these regional trains. I want a train from New York to Los Angeles to Miami, Miami to New York, Miami to Phoenix, New York to Seattle. I love Amtrak, but come on. It's like they're in the 60s. There has been very little improvement to Amtrak. And Adam, as a fellow traveler, I'm sure you can relate. My guys, just those who just joining, my name is Monroe Mann, YouTube #1 live streamer. Please subscribe. You also can follow me on TikTok, on Instagram, on X, all with the name Monroe Mann, except I think I'm Monroe Mann 77 on Instagram. We're doing Rose Reads, where I read books and I take notes, and then I share those notes with you guys. Moving on to this, again, we're doing Applied Economics by Thomas Sowell. He goes back to talking about government healthcare. It said, since these government-run healthcare systems set no limits on demand, patients seek as much care as they can get, driving up costs. Here's a case in point. I don't, quote unquote, pay out of pocket for my veteran healthcare. Sometimes I'll make an appointment and I will, not intentionally, but I'll skip it. They will send me a letter saying, Captain Monroe Mann, you had an appointment with the VA with your doctor last Monday. You missed it. When you miss appointments, it keeps doctors from seeing other veterans. Please, if you're not going to make your appointment, let us know. And they keep track of that. And eventually, if you do it enough, you kind of, I don't know what's going to happen. What would happen? Maybe I don't get to see doctors anymore, but that's kind of frightening. But when you're not paying out of pocket, you don't care as much. If somebody gives you something for free, you're not going to care for it as much as if you saved up 6 months to buy it. If someone just gives you a new Nintendo system, you're not going to care for it as much as you're saving. I'm saving up $40 a week to get a Nintendo because I wanted a new Nintendo for the last few years, and I'm finally saving up for it. But when I get it, I'm going to treat it kindly and carefully because I earned it. My feeling is I don't mind government health care, but you either need to serve in the military, serve in the Peace Corps, do a certain number of hours of community service, or, work as a policeman, fireman, or EMT. Like, do something for your fellow man. Why should you just get it? But he's going to talk about something here, too. He says, this is Thomas Sowell in Applied Economics. Wait times for surgery in places like Britain are significantly higher than in the USA. And price controls encourage black markets. So there are bribes in these systems that are not officially added to the total cost of healthcare. This was the same thing during Prohibition in the 1920s. What's up, guys, on TikTok? Oh, wow. Someone on TikTok donated $10,000 to me. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I can quit my job now. I got $10,000 someone donated on TikTok. But during Prohibition, like the government prohibits something, the people, if they want it, if there's a demand, there's gonna be a supplier. again, applied economics, that's what he's talking about. There's supply and demand. And they created all these black market vendors for alcohol. And that's what those speakeasies were. And I believe that's where they originated. I could be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong. And he says, as a result, it's common for Canadians and Brits to come to the United States for healthcare because of the waiting times. People are incentivized not to get health insurance. Listen to this. Because in the United States, no one will be turned away from an emergency room. Think about that. No one will get turned away from an emergency room. And that's true. Whether you have health insurance or not, you can go get medical care at the emergency room. Who's paying for it? Taxpayers. He says, in any such system, the key question is who makes the decision on who gets what treatment and when. And that's what he's talking about in terms of why he doesn't. This is Thomas Sowell, why he doesn't like government-run healthcare, because eventually, if private healthcare is completely eliminated, it's the government who's going to decide who gets care and who gets priority care. And the other reason why healthcare in the United States, he points this out, is so high is because the ease of filing malpractice lawsuits jacks up the price of medical malpractice insurance and the risk of medical care. So the doctors need to charge a heck of a lot more in order to compensate. Going back, I forget who was talking about it earlier about the medications and what, maybe it was Bodie. But here, Thomas Sowell says the price of medications is not based on the ingredients and the cost of manufacturing. It's based on the decades of research that resulted in the creation of the drug. And that's a very good thing. It's sort of like the story that they say about the doctor. I mean, the you got a leak, or your sink doesn't turn on. You call the plumber. The plumber comes over here, looks at it, and goes, "Oh, this is the problem." And he turns this lever, and now it's working. And you get the bill, $500. He goes, $500. He goes, you were there for 10 seconds. And then he goes, all right, I'll give you an itemized bill. Cost of my time, 10 seconds, was $1. The price for knowing exactly which lever to turn, $499. So here's something interesting. He talks about that, and this is something that I learned recently too. Do you know the generics that you get, the generic medication, like you can buy on Amazon or at CVS? It does not have to be 100% the same drug. Generics do not need to be chemically identical. Generics can produce blood levels as much as 20% below or 25% above that of the original drug. So he says. I haven't verified that, but apparently that's true. So a generic drug may not, based on the FDA, double check this because I did not verify this. I'm just trusting what he said as food for thought. But why can generics cost less? Because they do not necessarily have the exact same chemical composition. Next, he says the most common effect of laws limiting how prices will be permitted to go is to reduce the quantity supplied. And this is a big issue talking about in New York City now with the rent-controlled apartments. And the truth is, there are tens of thousands of empty apartments in New York City today that are empty because they're rent controlled and they don't meet code, and they can't charge enough rent to make enough money to upgrade the apartments. And so they think, you know what? It's not going to make any financial sense. I will lose more money by putting a tenant in because I've got to make all of these upgrades, but I can't charge a high enough rent to make it financially feasible. And as a result, there's complete vacancy of so many of the apartments. Food for thought. Food for thought. We've got a comment here from Adam says Amtrak does Miami to New York City, but it's not a high speed. Yeah, I looked at that. I mean, it takes more than 24 hours. I once drove from New York to Lorton, Virginia. I put my Jeep on the train and I got on the train and I slept overnight on the train. And at 7 a.m. the next morning, it arrived in Sanford, Florida. And then I drove another like 150 miles down to Miami. But it wasn't high speed. And that's what the United States really should have high speed. How can it not set the standard? I don't get it. And why don't I have at least 10 likes? Please double tap the screen. 6 likes and you're learning about economics? Come on. Doesn't get any better than this, ladies and gentlemen. Doesn't get any better than this. We got a few more points for this episode of Rose Reads, and then we're going to call it quits for the evening. Somebody took a like away, so we're down to 5. Tough crowd. Oh, we're back. We got 6 again. He says politicians. He is Thomas Sowell in his book Applied Economics. Politicians in various countries claim to bring down the cost of healthcare, when in fact they only bring down the individual patient's out-of-pocket costs. In other words, they're subsidizing the costs. So the costs are not actually lower. It's just the individuals paying for it think it's less. Again, Thomas Sowell, this is what he says. He says, Britain has government-run healthcare, and they have a chronic shortage of doctors to such an extent that they have to import them from third world countries. Interesting. Thomas Sowell says in the book, he said, historically, the government has never been the solution of the problem of affordable housing, but is a major part of the problem. And he summarizes saying that rent control in cities does not work. I probably agree. If we just removed rent control and let the free market do what it does, I think it would the problems I think would solve themselves. But unfortunately, we do have rent control of one shape or form in pretty much every major city in the country. Okay, so that's it for this episode. Next time, we're going to talk about what Thomas Sowell talks about: mortgage interest rates, insurance, and what else? And various other things to educate you, edify you, and all that jazz. Thank you, cool dude, for the comment. Adam says, "Oh, Anchor says I have real estate, but it's hard to find tenants nowadays." Uh, Anchor, I do too. My mom and I together own some real estate in Florida that we rented, and we lost a tenant. I had to reduce rent by $200 in order to attract a tenant. Finally got the place rented. Not making as much of a profit as before. We're still breaking even a little bit of a net, but it's market supply and demand. And Anchor, if you have real estate and it's not being rented, you got to either increase the value and keep your rent the same, or you have to reduce the rent and hope that you find somebody who finally goes, oh, you know what? That's reasonable. That's affordable. I live in this apartment here in New York. I'm outside the city by about 30 minutes. And rent is very expensive. And all of us here at the building, we have no idea why we're paying so much rent, because they don't deserve it. Maintenance is really terrible here. They don't fix things quickly. They don't fix things correctly. They don't fix things right the first time. People are getting double charged for rent. I mean, it's a very weird situation. And it's getting to the point where everyone is going to start talking and saying, we want a rent concession. We want the rent to be reduced. Why? Because it's not worth, and you have not been providing us what you have promised us. Adam says, I find that kind of hard to believe unless you're charging way too much. Yeah. Adam, I it's 100%. If you're charging too much, you're not going to find tenants. Now, again, if you have a mortgage on the property and the mortgage is a high interest rate, and again, this is where that 2008 mortgage crisis, why it happened. All these people bought real estate like with no money down, and they ultimately couldn't pay the mortgages, and they couldn't even rent it because the mortgage payments were so much per month that even if they got a tenant at the market rate, it still wasn't covering rent. So that is an issue. Cool Dude says, nice suit, thank you. Anchor says, most people in my country are homeowners, so no one wants to rent. Anchor, which country are you in where most people are homeowners? I'm not saying that you're wrong, but I find it very hard to believe that there's any country where more people own than rent. Is that true? Is there a country where where renters are the minority? Because certainly in the United States, renters are the majority. Bodhi says real estate seems like more of a headache than the stock market. So the whole thing with real estate either can be a headache if you don't know what you're doing and you don't do your homework. When I first got involved with real estate investing, it was a headache. And until I learned how to find the right tenants and learn how to put money from the rent every month into a repair fund, so that when something happens, and something is going to happen, plumbing's going to break, toilet's going to break, air conditioning's going to break, something's going to happen. Now I know every month money's going into the repair fund. And now when there's a repair, I got money in there. It's not a stress anymore. And I communicate with my tenants really well. They have my cell phone, and they text me whenever there's a problem. And within like usually 30 minutes, I get back to them. If I'm sleeping, as soon as I wake up and go, hey, no problem, I'll have somebody come over and take a look immediately. I'm such a good landlord that my tenants are very patient with me and they love me. And owning real estate now is not really stressful because I've dealt with all of the headaches and I survived them. And now I'm looking at getting the third rental property this year or next year. I'm not sure. I'm still figuring things out. But now I know that I can make money from rental real estate. Would I put all of my money into rental real estate? No. I always talk about this. Investor, INVESTOR. That's my acronym for diversifying. And Thomas Sowell would agree with me. Don't put all your money in one basket because something could happen. So I've got money in crypto. I got money in stocks. I've got money in businesses. I got money in real estate. I've got money in education. I've got money in blah, 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 blah. We have 8 likes. Come on, we need 2 more likes when we get the bronze medal on the YouTube live stream Olympics. I think I deserve that. Anchor says, I can't decrease my rent because I won't be making money anymore. Plus, I'm stubborn. Anchor, is it better to lose $100 a month or $2,000 a month? That's the question you have to ask yourself. It was extremely painful for me to drop the rent from 2050 or something like that, or 1950 down to 1800. So it was $150 less, making significantly less now. But I had to bite the bullet and say, Monroe, because it was vacant for 4 months. Monroe, do you want to keep this thing vacant for another 4 months and lose like $1,500 a month? or do you want to rent it for less money than you think it's worth and make $100 net profit per month? Put your ego to the side, and eventually it was very clear what the answer was. So, Anchor, don't be stubborn. Put your ego to the side and rent the place. Rent it. Does he say where he is? No. Anchor is in Luxembourg. 72% homeowners. It's so fascinating. I'm going to look that up. Guys, let's all do our homework and see if that is true, that there's 72% are homeowners in Luxembourg. Isabella says the rocking chair is making me sick. The rocking chair helps me continue to, keeps me in my groove, guys. Keeps me in my groove. Anchor says that's why people need to buy gold. That's another thing that I have. Gold, silver, platinum, palladium. And if you looked at the price of gold and silver lately, it has skyrocketed in the last year. Skyrocketed. Gold has never been at this high, and silver has never been this high. And my guess is it's going to keep going up, up, up. Like that song, we're going up, up, up. This is a moment. Golden, golden, golden. All right, well, we're not going to get to 10 likes today. This has been Rose Reads. My name is Monroe Mann. And thank you for joining me. When we do another Rose Reads, I will continue with Thomas Sowell's book, Applied Economics. And we will continue having a great time. And what time is it? It's 9:45. And no, I might do another live stream after this. I'm gonna see. Maybe I will do one more. All right, guys. Have a wonderful day. Thank you for the one person watching on TikTok, the 4 of you here on YouTube. Have a good one. Catch you soon. Please subscribe. Please click like. Same thing on TikTok. Let me turn off the TikTok phone first. Let's see. We're gonna see if I got. Okay, I got 64 viewers and 4 comments. I used to get so many more viewers and new subscribers on TikTok. It's becoming tough. Same thing here on YouTube. We're up with 3. I guess applied economics is not interesting. All right, guys. Have a good one.